Wherefore, Series 3, Episode 16. Mostly the arts of wizards are a bit unsubtle, at least if you catch them doing it. Wambleforth's dimension-bending boat is totally unsubtle if you see it turn up. Whitminster's goblet market-cum-trap was not subtle. It's got to the point where William moving the rest of Stroud away from his tower is visible and not subtle, although no one seems to care much. Unsubtle wizards tend to rely on the apathy of regular people. The quiet wizard's magic is incredibly subtle to the point whereby the other wizards assume he doesn't actually do much magic at all. They are entirely wrong about this, for in reality he is more magically active than the rest of them put together. It turns out that Sabrina has both an appetite for this kind of magic and a distinct aptitude for it. Subtle magic depends on being able to see what is going on and to pick out the things that are important or that have potential. It means reading the weave. The quiet wizard does not then tinker with the weave, but instead acts directly in the world to seed ideas, suggest action, and make small magical changes that will influence the course of events. He prefers inspiring action, but it's certainly not his only strategy. What makes his work so powerful is the sheer quantity of very small actions and how those accumulate. Sabrina starts out small and deliberately selfish, which is actually the best way to learn. It's important to get feedback on what your interventions do so as to be able to fine-tune both how you read a situation and how you act. She sets to work on her own family, making changes to improve her own comfort and watching how those play out. Of course she makes some mistakes, but part of the brilliance of this approach is that small actions can only create small mistakes that can be fettled with relatively little effort. She learns to think more precisely about the effect she wants to get. She starts to notice the small ways in which the quiet wizard engineers her, and is increasingly amused by this. What's especially charming is the knack for engineering her towards things she had no idea she even wanted. He's got her reading all kinds of non-fiction and delving into the secrets of Stroud's history. It turns out that her problem was never about a willingness to learn. It was simply not being that interested in the things her school was trying to teach her. She feels better about herself for knowing this. As a consequence, she stops playing at being dim, and this in turn has all kinds of interesting effects on her life. There is an art to building large changes out of tiny actions. There's also a fair amount of science to it. The other key ingredient turns out to be something that first looks a lot like arrogance. Sabrina notes that the quiet wizard does not doubt his own judgment. He goes beyond confidence in his sense of knowing what is right and needed. In addition to this, he is remarkably resilient to setbacks and does not seem to take any dents at all to his certainty when things go wrong. These are simply learning opportunities. He takes them in his stride, fettles his plans in line with the new information, and keeps going. Having had some months now to observe his work, Sabrina starts to realise that he's seldom very wide of the mark. It isn't really arrogance at all, because he's right, and he does often know better than anyone else about what would be a good idea. He has a knack for seeing what people want and need, and what would simply make the town better, or the wider world. His observational skills and assessments are effective, and his intentions are very, very good. Sometimes she wonders what would happen if a person with that kind of eye for detail and that much insight was hungry for personal power and gain. She thinks he would be terrifying and unstoppable. This is in part because no one has explained to Sabrina that magic depends on cooperation, and despots don't tend to get very far as a consequence. She is also right in that if our quiet wizard had a mind for evil, he could do any amount of harm, and acquire vast amounts of power and influence, but he doesn't. He keeps himself quietly in the background, gently manipulating people for their own good. She is impressed. At the same time, Sabrina is obliged to do a lot of wondering about who she is and what she wants. Like most young people, she has had her share of fantasies about power, fame, and fortune. The means to all those things have been placed in her hands. She has the wit to start questioning what she really wants from life, which is as well, because this will spare her a great deal of confusion and discomfort. Of course, it isn't any kind of coincidence that she started asking these questions about herself. The man directing her certainly isn't about to let her ruin herself with short-term thinking and lack of self-knowledge. He's far too good for that.